So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Zeanique Barber, and she is the VP of Health Cloud and Public Sector Cloud at Gerent, which is a firm that's been helping companies with the cloud for years. And she's also been helping companies herself for years as well. Organizations like GE, Accenture, Capital One, Peloton, also a professor at Trinity Washington University. So excited to hear what you're going to be sharing with us today. Zeanique, hand it over to you.
Thanks, Frank. Hi, everyone. And I just want to say, if you're turning in from one of those places that has the snowstorms that are going on, I'm happy you're here. Be safe. We're all thinking about you and hoping that we can utilize technology to help what's going on down there, and we can do predictive modeling so you all won't be in that predicament again. So thanks, Frank, for having me, and Dennis Scandrett, Delisha Hodo, Sands. You guys are doing an amazing job. I've been listening to all of the different speakers, and I think that Jennifer and team having this forum free to everyone and allowing different people to be able to have access to this forum is great. So thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. And let's jump right in. So if you were looking for the forum about emerging cybersecurity concerns, you're in the right place. And let's talk a little bit about how we envision the security breaches that we're facing right now. So when we think about the different security breaches that we're facing right now, one of the things that I hope to accomplish in this discussion today is that no matter what your level is from a cloud security perspective or a cybersecurity perspective, in this session, we'll be able to bring all of that information together so that if you are brand new to cybersecurity or cloud, or if you are the chief security officer for an organization, we hope that during this session, you'll be able to get something from this, and this specific session will be accessible for all. I want to do a plug for the April event. I think that the April 21st event is going to be key for everyone to come in and listen to what it means to be in cyber. I'm going to do a little bit of information around if you're new to cyber, and hopefully this discussion will give you insight into what it means to be in cyber, but there will be a complete forum around that, and I'm looking forward to it on April 21st, and I hope you all come back and participate with the next event that SANS is going to do. So right now, more than ever, we're seeing a lot of organizations have cybersecurity issues, data breaches. Frank talked a little bit about some of the organizations that I've worked with in the past, but as of today, February 18th, there have been 9 federal agencies and about 100 private sector companies that had a cyber attack or hacking incident and were compromised. So all of us, it's important that all of us have a perspective around what does it mean for an organization to be hacked, and how does it really affect you as an individual, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or if this is your first time ever and you signed up and you just wanted to hear about cybersecurity today and cloud security today. I want you to know that it's very important to note that cyber security and cloud and data security impacts us all. And when you think about the different federal agencies and the different private sector companies, federal agencies have all of our information. They have our census data. They have information from when we are born until when we die. And it goes with all of the different events that happen to us throughout the course of our life. So think about that impact. Think about how you found out that perhaps data that you have provided to the federal government has been compromised. Have you been contacted? When we think about cloud security and cybersecurity, it's a function of us all. It's all the way from the individual to the federal government, and we have to all partner together to make sure that we keep all of us safe. So hackers have compromised SolarWinds. This is one of the emerging cybersecurity concerns that's happening right now. But of course, with the pandemic, we've got a lot more data that's crossing through different business systems because we're utilizing our healthcare system much more than we ever have before. But when we think about something that's also happening, it's something called SolarWinds. And SolarWinds monitoring and management software, it's used by multiple government agencies and Fortune 500 companies. So as of today, the 9 federal agencies and about 100 private sector companies that were compromised, the emerging trend that has just happened, they were compromised because they do business with an organization called SolarWinds. SolarWinds has monitoring and management software, and the hackers were able to come in and compromise the software that SolarWinds uses to monitor and manage their software. Now let's think about that for a second. You provide your data, and then your data goes through different channels. So depending on where you put that information into the cloud, now what's the cloud? All the cloud is it's when you're able to utilize a username and a password. And earlier we heard it called credentialing. We've heard it called identity management, but all the cloud is the ability when we're looking at applications and business applications to be able to access information or business processes or even data through a username and a password. So let's think about this for a moment. SolarWinds has used their monitoring and management software to provide a business application software service to their clients, to their customers. And out of the multiple government agencies that they partner with, and out of the Fortune 500 companies that they work with, 9 federal agencies and about 100 private sector companies were compromised. So companies like Intel, NVIDIA, Cisco, Belcon, VMware. Now, when we think about VMware, VMware is known to keep our computers and our hardware safe. And also when we're using the web. So if here is SolarWinds, here is VMware, and perhaps you might have used VMware for something, and here is you. When these organizations are hacked, that means that you've been hacked as well. So increasingly over the years, we've seen different cyber attacks. In fact, I got my start really looking at cyber attacks in 2005 when an MCI employee left their laptop in a car, and then about 16,500 employee data was compromised. And I remember in grad school in the early 2000s when I was at Florida A&M University, we would talk about different organizations like WorldCom and Telecom and Arthur Andersen and Enron. And one of the main things that we talked about is the data, the thresholds, the indices. Why didn't anyone notify the different people who were harmed based off of what the system was doing or the business applications were doing? So when we think about what was being hacked, that means that even though this company, SolarWinds, their software that they provide has been hacked, that also means that you as an individual have been hacked. So if you didn't know before coming to this forum today, that it's very, very likely that your private sensitive data has been hacked as a result of just doing business or providing your username and login information and other private information that you have about yourself to different organizations like the US Treasury, the Commerce Department, State, Energy, and Homeland Security departments. And you really can't avoid providing that type of data to these agencies, and even some companies like VMware who have a large market penetration so that people are using their products to keep their computers safe. But think about, has anybody notified you that this has happened? Have you heard news about it? Has it come up in any of your social media feeds? Is it common conversation between you and your friends and you or your family? Think about why this is important to you, and think about especially if you're new into cybersecurity or if you're new into cloud security, how would you try to address this situation? How would you look at this? Well, let's look at a use case. And I heard one of our panelists earlier today, I believe it was Dominique West, who talked about use cases. So let's look at a use case next. So let's meet Cleveland. Cleveland is the VP of Protected Health. So all of us, we all have health information, whether you know it or not, and especially during this time, you and me and you, we all have health data. So Cleveland, in this scenario, he's the VP of Protected Health Information Data Security. So what that means is Cleveland's main mission is to keep protected health information, or PHI, data security safe. So what do we think from a use case scenario would be important to Cleveland? What is it that he wants to make sure happens? Well, let's think about it. Cleveland needs a way to automate, and we heard several panelists talk about automation, right? Cleveland needs a way to automate our company's data policies so that we can keep our data secure through infrastructure, software, and business applications, and outside data that we interact with, and also our internal data. So what is important is that if Cleveland is in charge of keeping the data safe, then all of the different business applications that Cleveland works with, he needs to ensure that those business applications also keep that information safe, the PHI information safe. So he has to be very mindful of not just the internal information that he has, but perhaps Cleveland has patient data that has to go out to the federal government. So maybe it needs to go out to Medicaid and Medicare, or maybe it needs to go out to HHS, or maybe it needs to go into various different channels so that people can get vaccines for perhaps a mass pandemic that has happened, and they want to be able to get the vaccine information out quickly. So there are a lot of different data channels that Cleveland comes into contact with. And as the VP of Protected Health Information, and especially if you're new into cybersecurity, you want to think about, if I needed to keep patient health information safe, how do I do that? And so that's what Cleveland is supposed to be charged with today. Well, let's talk about some things, and we've heard some of these ideas before in other conversations. We need to ensure that we have a holistic approach or a mindful approach to keeping our data safe. So this is something, when you think about keeping something safe, you lock it, right? Your front door. If you want to make sure that no one comes into your home, hopefully you want to do different things to keep it safe. So let's do an analogy, a one-to-one analogy. Cleveland wants to keep the data safe, the patient health data safe, and you want to keep your home safe. So let's think about all of the different ways of keeping your home safe. The first thing you can do is develop an end-to-end process or plan. So if you want to keep your home safe, one of the first things you may want to do is make sure that you lock your door. You may also want to make sure that all of your windows are down and they're also locked. But perhaps you want to have an extra level of security. And so perhaps you may get an alarm system or a ring alarm or something else. And these are all under the umbrella, or all under the house, if you will, of keeping your home safe. Now, let's take that same concept and think about Cleveland and what Cleveland needs to do to keep the protected health information safe. Well, first, he needs to have an end-to-end system. We had an end-to-end system. Our system was the door, the windows, the security system. That was a part of a parts to a whole. So what Cleveland has to do, and we saw this in other presentations, is he has to have from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4, when it comes to this particular type of data, this health data, and of course, this impacts us all because of what's going on in the world. We want to be sure that Cleveland has a step-by-step start and end plan to keep our data safe. Now, how does Cleveland do that? Well, one of the ways that Cleveland can do that is he can start by classifying the different data. So before Cleveland is able to say, this is my end-to-end data security process or approach, he needs to be very aware of what type of data he has. So the first thing that he would need to do is he'd need to start to understand the data, understand if it's private, understand if it's confidential. Are there different layers, and are there different prioritizations of the different health data? So he'll need to understand what type of data is his organization consuming and what type of information is his organization sending out. One of the first things that we want to really make sure and think about is who controls the data. Is Cleveland in charge of the whole data? I don't think so. Usually at an organization, there are a lot of data owners. And so you want to be very mindful of, after you've got all of the data, all of the information, right? You have the whole neighborhood. So we went from keeping a house safe to now we want to keep the whole neighborhood safe. Cleveland has to understand who owns each data, who lives in each house, because then he needs to talk to and understand how those data owners are keeping their data safe. Now, when we develop an end-to-end process, hopefully you have an overall approach to keeping all different types of data safe. It's very important as a best practice that organizations have an overall approach to keeping data safe. And so as Cleveland is the VP of Protected Health, he's got an overall approach. He's said it, he's put it in a governance model, he's documented it, he's determined how he will monitor it and check it off. And so now he's established what the rules are. Now he needs to understand how his organization is functioning under those rules. One of the things that we see a lot when it comes to data being breached, especially in high transactional environments where a lot of data is going back and forth, is that different employees and even contractors, and contractor is someone who doesn't work for the organization but provides a certain service. What we see is a lot of the different resources don't follow the policies and procedures that have been put in place. Now, before they can follow them, you have to have them in place. You have to have an approach. You have to have step-by-steps on how they can do that. But then you also have to have checks and balances. And so one of the things that we see as a vulnerability around those checks and balances is that we don't know who all of the data owners are. And so we want to understand who those data owners are. And then after we do, we want to make sure that they know how to keep the data safe. So we've got our high level approach from Cleveland. We've got what type of data we have. We've identified the different data owners. Now we're trying to understand how these data owners are keeping this data safe. Are they following the rules and the policies and procedures that Cleveland has put in place? And because Cleveland is the VP of Protected Health, Cleveland's rules and policies and procedures generally come from various different places. Those requirements can come from the federal government, they can come from different partners, but what Cleveland must do is they may come from different security protocols that are put into the industry from NIST. But what's important is that Cleveland gets informed information around what his governance policies and procedures should be, and then he must document the approach, and then he must determine if his organization is actually following those protocols and procedures. And if they're not, then he needs to put together a mitigation plan and a mitigation strategy, and also a disaster recovery plan in the event that until the company gets to parity or gets to a best practice standard, that we're able to put in mitigation strategies there. So let's talk about popular business software and applications. And we heard about AWS earlier, we heard about Google earlier, and Salesforce is a really great partner. I've been working with Salesforce for the past decade or so, and before that, some legacy ERPs from a business application perspective, so SAP and Oracle and Siebel and some of those legacy systems. But what you want to look for a partner. So when you're looking at purchasing business applications and software, you want to know that your partner is addressing any emerging trends or cybersecurity concerns that are happening in the environment. So I want to read to you something that Salesforce put out. And I think that we've got a lot of professionals here that partner with different organizations that perhaps buy business applications for their company or use different business applications or apps. So when you think about business applications, they can be a gamut of things, but anytime you go outside of your organization's firewall, then and you're logging into another website or online presence, that's now a business application. So if you're logging in to do business work through Instagram and Facebook, that's now a business application. It could be Salesforce, it could be AWS, it could be a myriad of things, but if there's a login name and a password, then there needs to be policies and procedures in place. And you want to make sure that you have good partners. So in a formal partner in Salesforce, let's read what they wrote, because I think this shows really, really good ethical response to what's happening in the world. Because when you look at business applications and organizations that have a large footprint into business applications, Salesforce is one of them. So we want to make sure that when we're partnering with different organizations, they take their due diligence to address what's happening in the market. So what Salesforce put out, which I think is really, really prudent of them, is that they said, we conducted a thorough analysis and determined that the SolarWinds Orion platform software is not directly used in any Salesforce environment. That's very important, because when you're partnering with an organization, when something happens, they have to have the ability to do something called a root cause analysis. So when Cleveland is looking at an end-to-end data security system, that security system is made up of different bits and pieces. One of those pieces of that end-to-end data security system is what happens if something happens. So how can you do a root cause analysis and provide that comforting knowledge of whether something happened or not based off of your involvement or your application's involvement into an organization's environment? So that's something that I really wanted to make sure that when we're looking at organizations that you are pairing with, that you're mindful of the type of mitigation approach strategies that they have in place. And also it's very important to understand what type of root cause analysis that they can do, and then what's the turnaround time for being able to provide you with an answer. So next thing is that we want to talk about, and we mentioned earlier about the comprehensive security approach, and I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for questions at the end. So let's look at data security architecture best practices are a defense against cyber attacks. So you as a cybersecurity professional, or you as someone who's an aspirant into the cybersecurity profession or cloud security profession, you want to make sure that you know what the best practices are in your field. So this is what Cleveland did. So when Cleveland was trying to determine what his governance models were and what should inform his policies and procedures that he's documented so that his employees who own and manage different data sets can follow, and then he can monitor and check and audit, is that Cleveland must make sure that it's informed by what we call a best practice. And what a best practice is it's an industry standard that says this is the way that you should do something because this is a likelihood of being able to get the result that you desire. And this is how we do different things in our industry based off of a standard that is met with the threshold that keeps different processes and steps safe. So what Cleveland must do, Cleveland, before he monitors, before he silos, before he identifies a different application, he has to know what those different best practices are. And then he needs to ensure that he's put a policy and procedure in place so that his team has the information that they need to be able to follow. So when we think about different roles that different people can have as it relates to cloud security, and keep top in mind what's happening right now in the world, there is a huge market for cybersecurity professionals and cloud security professionals, whether it's in health, whether it's in finance, whether it's in the public sector. There is a huge market for professionals, especially diverse professionals who will be able to bring a diverse acumen and understanding of how they would keep something safe. If you are used to keep something safe in a neighborhood that perhaps is not that dangerous, you may look at security in a different way versus someone who may come from a neighborhood that knows specifically that they must keep safe or it's a matter of life and death, I want to make sure that I point that out, that cybersecurity and especially application security engineers is in demand and there's room for everyone. And we need people in the industry who keep things safe and that they do it from a different perspective. We saw Goodman from Prince George's County keep the Capitol safe. And we want to make sure that we have people that can keep our data safe from all different types of vulnerabilities, because it really is the bedrock of how we're able to do different things and get things accomplished in this country and really in the world. So when we think about application security engineers, what they do is they focus on protecting applications in order to prevent attackers, right? And they do that because they don't want them to gain sensitive data. If they gain that data, they can do all different types of things with it. So if you're thinking about how does cybersecurity fit for me, or how does cloud security fit for me, and you came to the BIPOC in Cybersecurity Forum trying to find those answers, maybe you can consider application security engineer, because what they do, and we think about the use case that we talked about earlier, is they keep the data safe. They keep the house safe. So if that's something that appeals to you and you perhaps want to learn more about how to do that in an environment in technology, then I really implore you to consider becoming an application security engineer. If you've been in the industry for some time and you're realizing that, hey, there are a lot of business applications at my organization, and there's a lot of data and I have no idea who owns the data. There are no protocols to make sure that my different resources don't go into different places on the internet that perhaps would pose a vulnerability to how they're engaging with it to our internal infrastructure, then I implore you to do something called health check. And the health check, one functionality of that specifically with Salesforce is there's an assessment where you can get security gaps and understand what the security gaps are. And so what happens when you do that health check and the security gaps assessment is it'll allow you to determine where there are opportunities for you to see where your challenges are and how you can put together a mitigation approach. So we want to look at your business needs. We want to look at all of your current configurations, especially if you're using something like a Salesforce. And then we would be able to put together a report for you, evaluate your findings, and then put together a roadmap for you so that you're able to do what you want to do with your data, but in a very safe, secure way when you're using your business applications. So I'll pause there so that there's time for any questions, but I appreciate everyone. I love, Ashton, what you're doing there with the visual. I think that is dynamic. The more and more we're able to marry arts, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, STEAM together, we'll realize that there is really, really not that much different between math and art. It's really a perspective and how we look at it from a diversity of thought. So I thank you all for your time and attention today. And Frank, I'll turn it back to you.
Hey, Zeanique, great talk. Really appreciate that. You mentioned application security engineers, which I love. I started my career as a developer back in the day, long time ago, over 20 years ago. So it definitely resonates with me. And at the very beginning, you also mentioned the New to Cyber event that is coming up. Now, in terms of application security engineers, kind of that role, any suggestions, any tips on how people should get started in that area?
Yes. So I've got some different hobbies that I have, and one of them is developing quick curriculums. So I know that you all are putting together a graduate certification in cloud, and I'm really looking forward to what you all will put together for that curriculum. But the tip that I would give everyone is to go into your web browser, whatever your search engine is, and actually, if I'm able to show my screen, and I think that I am. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Yes.
Not yet. I think you have permission to share, though.
Okay, all right. Fantastic. There we are. So what I would say is go to Salesforce. So Salesforce has something called Trailhead, and this is how you would get there. And it's free. It's a free learning service and anyone can use it, but I like to do different curriculums on here. So I have a curriculum that I created called Cloud Security. So if someone was interested in kind of understanding what it means to be an application engineer and getting their start, this is a free curriculum that anyone can use. I'll put it in the Slack. Let's see how dynamic and agile we can be. I'll put it in the Slack, and this has got all of the information: cloud security engineering, security basics, engineer responsibilities, data security. So this is a good way to get you started, and definitely check that out, and that should help you quite a bit. Here you are. And I'm going to put it in there in hyperspeed so we can be very productive as we are walking through ways of things we can learn, because learning is fundamental for sure.
All right. Hey, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate it. A reminder to everybody here, if you continue the conversation here in Slack, as Zeanique just showed, and reminder to fill out the evals for Zeanique and all of the other speakers as well. So, hey, let's give her a virtual round of applause. Thank you so much.